this is Dread from Epic Builds. In today's video topic, we will go over Forge Strike, Multistrike, Fizz, Forge Guard. Turns out both these skills are mediocre by their own, but when combined, they become more than the sum of their parts. Before we get into the video, I would appreciate a like and a comment, as that's the best way to support the channel currently, and also the best way to tell YouTube I am doing a good job. So if you do not know, Forge Strike is also a skill with a long and troubled history. It has had its added damage effectiveness raised not once, not twice, but 3 times now, all the way up to 350%. And it still feels bad to play, by itself, that is. That's the thing. In patch 8.3, we got a whole Sentinel rework. Erasing Strike and Judgment, the other signature Big Daddy Sentinel skills, benefited heavily from. Forge Strike is kind of the red-headed stepchild of the Sentinel skills. It's not even the best way to play Forged minions now that we have Warpath that can just spawn Forged minions instead. All of this sounds bad, but we have one saving grace: Multistrike. Multistrike itself is kind of meh. It has decent clear but god-awful single target. But there is a node inside of it that lets you consume its armament charges, the charges it uses to spawn additional swords, to proc a Forge Strike. This ignores cooldown and technically costs 40 mana. But since Multistrike is one of the utility Sentinel skills at 0 mana, Time and Faith on the passive tree allows us to gain mana with Multistrike, pretty much nullifying the mana cost. So now that there is no cooldown, pretty much no mana cost, and all we have to do now is just spam attack speed. And that is one of Forge Guard's biggest strengths. See, the whole problem with Forge Guard was its signature skills like Forge Strike and Smelter's Wrath, commonly referred to as Smelter's Ass by the community, as it is by far one of the worst skills in the game. Turns out standing still sucks. These skills don't scale with attack speed, causing the best node in the entire Forge Guard passive tree, the 40% increased attack speed while holding a two-handed sword, kinda useless. But now that we can proc Forge Strike through Multistrike, it means attack speed equals more Forge Strike procs, as we don't have to worry about mana or cooldown. The best thing as well, with Forge Strike, it has a large amount of base crit inside of its tree, alongside Multistrike having it as well. All of these factors come together to make one of the best Forge Guard builds I have ever played in terms of how fun it is and how it performs, especially since this patch essentially gutted Warpath for physical only builds by locking all the damage behind other nodes. It means that this easily takes the cake. At least if we ignore minion builds, of course, the other archetype that Forge Guard is good at. I am showcasing this build, but I will tell you now, I made a few mistakes in gearing, mainly not stacking strength for increased armor, as a viewer pointed out. And you will feel much tankier if you follow the build planner below and watch the video. With all that being said, let's get into the video, shall we? Alright, here we are in game with the build. It's my Forge Guard. So we're going to go over the combo. So mainly the combo is pretty simple. It's just set up your sigils with a reversal trick, and of course just smack at the enemy. And just keep going. And you do pretty good damage. So pretty much what's happening is Multistrike is hitting for like about 60k average. Forge Strike is hitting for like 130k average. Then of course the detonating ground is like hitting for 100k average. So as you kind of like spam on the enemy, you'll like get like pretty much just a lot of damage, as you can tell in that Orbis clip I showed you. Yeah, like the damage is pretty good. My problem is I kind of went a little bit overboard on the damage and not enough on the defense, as you can tell by my HP count, and we'll fix that in the planner. But yeah, let's get into the skills, shall we? So for Forge Strike itself, actually, we'll talk about Multistrike first, because that's more important. So first we take 5 points into Way of the Sword. So the way this works is, since we have 4 stacks of Multistrike, we actually get 40 flat physical from this, which is really good, because if you did not know, we're only at like 150 plus whatever is on our helmet. So it's like something like that. So, like, that's a lot of flat, turns out. Now, I tested this. I did test this. So, what happens is we consume our armament stacks, right? And that will cause a forge strike. Now, normally it's not supposed to give you the flat from Way of the Sword for the forge strike because it consumes it, but apparently it is working as I tested it. It does work. So you can use this for now until they fix it, probably. Normally, I would not abide by abusing bugs, but in my humble opinion, that is how it should work. As I don't think there should be anti synergies built directly within the tree like this. Like, for instance, if you are procking something with like Forge Strike, or if you're using Void Cleave or whatever, I really, 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 really do not believe that you should be punished for wanting to take a node like this that is not directly damaged, but is more of utility, at least in my opinion. I really do not like how this node shouldn't work. At least that's what Mike said on the Discord. Now, whether or not that's like the actual decision in terms of balance, I don't know. But yeah, this node does work with this node, which is nice. And of course, we grab one node into Perfect Steel for the extra stack, and then of course another stack. This reduced attack speed doesn't matter for us because we have so much. And of course, we have 4 stacks now, and then we use Fiery Justice. Well, maximum stacks of armament in your positive mana attacking with Multistrike will consume all stacks and 40 mana to use Forge Strike. And this will ignore its cooldown. You can spam it as much as you want, which is really nice. That's a really big plus. That's really nice. And of course, so we don't have to worry about the attack speed on Forge Strike. We don't have to worry about anything. It just procs it for us, which is nice. So we can just play multi-strike instead. And of course, we take 5 points into initial strike. This will make it so our single target's better. Because like I said, more importantly, the single target is the most important thing about this kind of build. Then 3 points into alpha cuts. This allows us to run just melee flat and attack speed on our sword so that we don't have to worry about crit on our gear, as well, crit on our sword. And of course, 5 points into Path of the Night. Uh, as of right now, how I have this set up, we are always pretty much at 3,000 armor, which is good enough, although you want to be much more armor than that, as I'll show you later. But yeah, this is pretty much just giving us 100% more damage multi-strike. Now, for Forge Strike here, we grab 3 points into Ironbound, giving us base crit and crit multi, which are really important. Singular Craft for more base crit. Thankfully, this bleed chance didn't screw me over, which is nice. But yeah, the base crit, and of course, like 8% base crit is a lot of base crit, which is nice because it makes it so we don't have to run base crit on the sword, which means we can run attack speed instead. Of course, we take 5 points into Heavy Strike for 50% more hit damage, which is nice. 20% more hit damage versus rares and bosses, which is also really nice. Of course, 4 points into Strike Smash. This is better than grabbing the flat damage, as having the AoE of the Forge Strike be big is really good for us, as the clear gets a lot better when we have this. I tried Spear Forge. The problem is the clear kind of feels bad without it, so it's better just to have Spear Forge. I mean, it's better just to have Strike Smash instead. And of course, 2 points travel into Temper, the added melee fire. We don't scale it that much, but it's still usable. And of course, detonating ground. Pretty much this is just an extra hit of Forge Strike for us, which is really nice. Does almost as much damage as Forge Strike thanks to Lava Burn. But yeah, and that's pretty much it for Forge Strike. Pretty much just set up to do as much damage as possible. We don't have to worry about cooldown recovery speed or attack speed or moving the mana cost. We don't have to care about any of that, which is really, really nice. Then for sigils, stereotypical sigil setup, nothing different here. Same thing with volatile reversal. It's your stereotypical volatile reversal setup, except it's just, increased damage taken instead of anything else. Then of course, Lunge is a little bit different. So Lunge has proven to be a lot more usable in this kind of build than normal because of this node. So Warrior's Renewal. So you reduce Lunge's remaining cooldown by 8% when you use a different melee attack and hit at least one enemy. So the way this works is if I use Lunge and I attack with Multi-Strike and hit, well, I have to use both. There you go. So you can see it. So as you can tell, it reduces the cooldown for my lunge, which is really nice. Now, normally 1 point in this isn't really good, but thankfully, Forward Strike counts as a different attack. So we get both of them at once, which is like as long as we're spamming Forward Strike as well. Since we have so much attack speed, we can actually just spam Forward Strike as well outside of our multi-strike and stuff, which is really cool. Like that's really nice. So this just gives us more cooldown for our lunge. Why is that important? Well, down charge. You regain a percentage of your missing health when you use lunge. The problem with builds like this that are a lot more bursty than DPSy is leech is hard to come by. Yes, you do have the leech inside, of course, you have the leech right inside Void Knight and stuff like that. But the problem is, since you're not always constantly dealing damage, you're not always constantly leeching. And stuff like this, Dawn Charge helps you feel a lot tankier. And as you can tell in that Orbis clip, I abused Dawn Charge just to keep my HP up so I don't die. And of course, we grab 2 points into Endless Will, so you get additional recovery of 6%, so it's 14% every single time it happens. We take 2 points travel to Ambuscade, and then 1 point into Double Strike for the extra lunge charge, so that obviously we can zoom through monos easy. 5 points on the Dawn Charge. Like I said, this is very strong. This is not healing. This is gain health, so it does not scale with healing effectiveness. Now, the really strong thing about this is it scales with your HP. So if you have like 3,000 HP, it'll be more healing than like 2,000 HP, yada, 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 which is really good. 4 points into Juggernaut Dash Travel, then 1 point into Unstoppable. You're invulnerable while lunging. This is like by far one of the best things ever, because when you're like dashing through like AoEs and stuff, it's really good. As you can tell in the Orbis clip, I literally dashed through all of his orbs. I wouldn't be able to do that without Unstoppable, which is really nice. Then the rest of the points don't really matter. I just had like extra points. I couldn't really find anything else that was usable. Like you could go for the frailty, like you could go for a little bit of fizz pen. Like the problem is we don't have enough points, but if you did have a +2 to lunge on your chest, you would grab the Cold of the Week, but I don't really think that's worth it. It's really hard to find what to use for these last 3 points because the way lunge is set up. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the skills. And now for the passives. So we take 8 points into Fearless for the Vitality, which is nice. We want as much HP as possible. 2 points travel into Juggernaut. It's also capping our Void Res right now. 5 points into Armor Clad for the reduction. We're always in melee range, so it's really nice. 5 points in Valiant Charge. This is really strong because it counts our lunge as a movement skill, which reduces the cooldown of it, which is really, really good. And of course, Time and Faith. This is the node I talked about in the intro. This makes it so we gain mana when we use Multistrike. It makes up for all the mana that we're consuming with Forge Strike from Fiery Justice, which is really nice. Then 5 points into Blade Master. Just gives us the sword attack speed, just as much attack speed as possible. That's all we want is attack speed. Then we grab 5 points into Abyssal Endurance. This helps us with our resistances, gives us a little bit of HP, but mainly we want World Eater because it gives us a lot of leech, which is really nice. You can like mess around with the points in this, doesn't really matter. And of course, for Paladin, it's your usual setup. Just get the Fizz Pen, which is really good. And then, of course, the resistance, so we can get up the Sigils of Hope. Then for Forge Guard, these nodes have been really good. It's like 70% increased damage and a lot of increased armor, which is nice. 1 point travel into Fresh from the Forge. Sadly, it will not count the procs from Forge Strike, so this is useless pretty much for like your Forge Strike stuff, which is like whatever. Then of course 6 points into Guardian just for more flat HP to move up the tree. 8 points in the Champion of the Forge. Increased damage is very hard to come by as a Sentinel, especially a Forge Guard, so you definitely want as much increased damage as possible. 6 points into Might for the increased health and the strength, which are both really good. Eventually 5 points into Infinite Bulwark for the increased armor on potion use because we want as much armor as possible. 8 points into Duelist for the crit chance because we want as much crit chance as possible, so we are always critting. 6 points into Lethal Strikes. Crit multi is really strong for us. And of course, 8 points into Molded by the Forge, one of the best nodes in the entire game, ironically, and it's on Forge Guard. And just having that 40% increased attack speed on a two-handed sword, and on top of the attack speed prefix, and on top of the good base attack rate, it means we can attack really, 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 really fast and proc stuff really, really, really fast, which is really nice. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the passives. Now for the gearing. My gear, this is by far one of the worst gear setups I have ever had. I will fix this in the planner and I'll talk about what I did wrong and we'll go over it. First off, my idols are an absolute mess. I have like some HP idols, some resistance idols because my gear isn't perfect, some more resistance idols, crit chance idols because you want some crit chance idols so you can reach the max crit eventually. And my idols are a complete mess, as you can tell. And then for eventually you would want all crit HP idols. That would be what you would want, is crit then flat HP at the bottom. That's what you would want. But the problem is I'm using it to cap my resistances right now because I have really shitty gear. But yeah, the helmet. This is your perfect helmet. You want the Vengeance because it's increased melee damage. You could go for strength instead. I believe strength would be better because you want more increased armor so that you're tankier. And of course, the melee fizz while wielding a sword is really strong because more flat fizz is really good for us when we're stacking fizz and fizz pen and all that. And then, of course, increased health and endurance would be really strong. I just didn't really have a good helmet at the time. The amulet, this is like perfect, like the fizz, the crit. You could probably go for fizz pen instead of fizz pen. We have a lot of melee crit thanks to our boots, so we don't really need the crit multi. I would rather have the fizz pen. And of course the crit, so we have more crit. And for the chest, this is your perfect chest other than that armor. That armor could be flat HP. Other than that, it's like pretty much perfect chest. You only need a +1 to multi-strike to make the build work, and you don't need a +1 to forge strike to make the build work. But all that increased damage is really nice. Instead of that +1 to forge strike, you could run strength instead and get a lot more armor, which is nice. The rings, this is like a really good ring. It's just like, it's just weird, but like the fizz, the crit is really good. The HP is really good. Resistance obviously is really good. I could eventually swap out this bone amulet thanks to it. Fizz damage on your, you want fizz damage everywhere, by the way. And if cleanse and HP, this is your perfect belt pretty much. Instead of that mana regen, we want fizz damage. And of course, the fizz res is really good, so it's a really good ring. Then, of course, I'm using like my busted gloves. Obviously, you wouldn't want it on this base. You would want it on the void res base, but it's like whatever. Both of them work. It's like whatever, but this is really good for us because that increased attack speed is really nice. Of course, the crit chance is really good. Sorion Step, this is one of the main reasons why this archetype even functions in the first place. Just having all that extra crit multi makes it so that you don't have to worry about crit multi on your prefixes, which means you can focus them all on increased damage and increased crit, which makes up for all Forge Guard's weaknesses. So having this much crit multi is good. And of course, we have so much Fizz Res as a Forge Guard Sentinel anyways, like it makes up for itself. And of course, for the relic here, this is like pretty much your perfect relic. The res could obviously be higher, but like pretty good relic overall. And that's pretty much it for the gearing. Like I said, mainly you just want to get your HP a little bit higher and you want your strength to be a little bit higher so you're not as squishy. As you can tell, my resistances are all over the place. Yeah, with that being said, I hope you guys enjoy the gameplay.